Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for tuning in today. Well, today on the show, we're going to talk a little about one of the most challenging issues in certain fields. It is saline areas of fields, just saline soils in general. What can you do to fix those and maximize production?
Well, sounds like it's going to be a show of challenges because I'm going to talk about lodging, whether it's in soybeans or corn or other crops. What are the causes of lodging and what can you do to fix it on your farm?
Coming up later in the show, we've got our Iron Talk segment as well as our Weed of the Week. But first, here's today's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to deliver some bad news. The food you're eating right now contains natural carcinogens. Okay, yep, I said it. It contains natural carcinogens. You know what? Everything can cause cancer. The dose always makes the poison. We're going to talk a little bit today also about how plants respond to stress, and one of the ways they do it is producing more natural carcinogens.
When you think about it, just use some common sense. If you're a plant and you've got something attacking you, a bug or whatever, you're going to try and fight it off. Just like our body tries to fight off the common cold or tries to fight off an infection when we get a cut on our arm. Plants were made the same way. They try to fight off these things and they produce some natural pesticides in the plant that are going to try to fight those pests and other problems off.
One of the things about those natural pesticides, many have not even been tested by the EPA or the FDA, anything like that. What actually is in our food, sometimes we don't really know. And the reason why we're bringing all this up today is because there are a lot of people in the United States that say, oh, pesticides, man-made pesticides are so dangerous. Look, if we don't use man-made pesticides and we don't do a good job controlling weeds, insects, and diseases, then what happens is the plant gets under more stress and it produces more natural pesticides and more natural carcinogens. That is a proven fact. So I don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, oh, everybody needs to use pesticides constantly on their crops or anything like that. But what I'm saying is in all these things, we got to look at moderation, we've got to look at the dose makes the poison, and we also have to look at what are the tests, scientific tests, actually showing us about how harmful some of these products are, both natural and man-made.
One of the interesting things too, Brian, is when you try and look up the research on this, you can certainly find some research on plants producing their own natural pesticides, but you don't find that much data on it, as you mentioned, because we're spending so much money on all the other crazy things that we're worried about. So it's one of the things that is a challenge in society today is, well, we chase whatever the latest thing is. We're worried about one problem or another problem, and we forget about doing the basic research on things in the environment that we're consuming every day.
Well, there's been a lot of research out there to show that we're consuming about 10,000 to 1 natural pesticides versus man-made pesticides, 10,000 to 1. So again, I'm not saying all pesticides are safe or anything like that, but what I am saying is the use of certain pesticides, especially the safer ones, can absolutely help reduce the natural pesticides produced by the plant and the natural carcinogens produced by the plant.
Well, and that's what farmers are trying to do, is just reduce stress overall on the plants that they're growing so they can produce good, healthy food for us to eat. One of the things that we'll have to reduce out in fields is pressure from our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Avoid dry run failures with the new Hi-Pro Force Field pump. Providing the ultimate protection, this wet seal pump will save you on costly in-season downtime to keep your sprayer running. Now all you have to worry about is the weather. Hi-Pro, helping you spray better.
Leading the charge in strip tillage for more than a decade, the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm today.
Commodity Classic is a great place to recharge your batteries, to reconnect with why you started farming in the first place, and why you can't imagine doing anything else. You'll be among thousands of farmers who share your thirst for knowledge and your passion for agriculture. Commodity Classic is a positive, uplifting, and inspiring environment, one that will get you fired up to grow beyond when you head back home. Spend some serious farmer time in Anaheim, Tuesday, February 27th through Thursday, March 1st. Discover more at commodityclassic.com.
Grow your incentives, not weeds. Earn an additional $6 per acre in cash back when you apply XtendiMax herbicide with Vapor Grip technology on your Roundup Ready 2 Xtend soybeans, along with endorsed herbicides from Roundup Ready Plus Crop Management Solutions. Now you have the right tools to manage weeds and your bottom line. Visit growyouриncentives.com to see your total incentives opportunity.
There are 6,272,640 square inches in an acre. We counted. Why? Because we designed the TigerMate 255 field cultivator and 2000 series early riser planter to maximize every single one. So when you create the most level seed bed in the industry and target a nickel size area to plant a seed and never miss, you'll know in high efficiency farming, there's one name to count on: Case IH. Rethink productivity. Learn more at caseih.com/everyinch.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
We're going to talk about saline soils today, and there are a lot of questions about what exactly is a saline soil. How does that compare to a sodic soil?
Okay, well, first of all, I even had to pull the sheet out because I didn't know what the official classification was with this. So here's what they say for a saline soil. You can have up to over 4 in terms of electrical conductivity. Your soil pH is supposed to be less than 8.5. Your sodium adsorption ratio is supposed to be less than 13, and your soil physical condition is still considered normal. So does that really help me figure it out as an agronomist? Not much. What I'm looking at is, do I have a salt problem out there? Is it salt versus sodium? Okay, so if I've got very high sodium levels, well, then that's a sodic soil. If I just am talking about salt, that's a saline soil.
All right, so you got through the chart there and the technical classifications, but here I am talking to the drain tile guy, and the big question people have is, will drain tile just fix this for me?
Well, it's absolutely going to help, and that's the first step. So we get questions all the time about, well, what can I do here? Do I need to have the right variety and all this kind of stuff? Look, that's a Band-Aid approach. So
well, you need that Band-Aid for this year.
Yeah, and maybe you need to raise barley or something like that. Or we were talking about foxtail barley in our last show.
Don't raise that. Don't raise that.
That's going to survive very well in those situations. But here's the whole thing. You've got to start with drainage. Salts, remember, are leachable. So what we want to do ideally is turn this saline soil, we want to turn it into a salt soil and have it leach out. It will absolutely leach out, but it's not going to if you have poor drainage. You've got to get some tile in that ground.
All right, so one of the things that guys like to do is put something that has sulfur in it to try to help leach things out.
But here's the thing. You may not need anything. The only thing may be drain tile for you. We want to look at your soil test. Here's where I'm going with this. Sometimes I see guys that have 1,000 parts per million of sulfur already sitting there in the soil. Well, what's going to happen with that sulfur? It's going to bind with that saline that's out there. You're going to have all kinds of salt, and it's going to absolutely leach out. You have totally fixed your problem just with drainage. Now, let's say that you have low sulfur levels and you have very high calcium levels. Well, yeah, then in that case, I'm probably just going to throw straight elemental sulfur out there.
All right, so let's say you're talking elemental sulfur. Let's say that you've got a pH of 8, because that could be one of the things that happens here. As you get those high salt levels, it could raise pH.
Yep.
So if you've got a pH of 8, Is elemental sulfur the answer to that, or ammonium sulfate or gypsum or something else?
Okay, well, we're worried about the wrong problem here. The first problem is you've got to fix the drainage. The second problem is you've got to get rid of your salt. When you do those two things, you're going to find most likely your pH is going to come down naturally. So I'm not worried about any of the rest of the stuff. What I am concerned about is make sure you've got sulfur out there and lots of it to help get any of those salts out of the ground.
All right, now to get things growing in those spots, because here's the problem we see, Brian, is, hey, nothing's growing in those areas except kochia. And now I've got this big Roundup resistant kochia issue out in my farm, or in different parts of the country, maybe a different weed.
Yeah, but again, we're worried about the result instead of what's the actual problem. Once we identify it's saline soil, then we've got to look at, hey, do I have enough sulfur out there? If I do, and I've now fixed the drainage, okay, then the next thing is, do I have good calcium levels or not? If I don't have good calcium levels, and let's say I want to get some more sulfur out there, you know what? I might throw some gypsum out there. That might help me in this whole solution. I'll replace some of those salts with calcium, and I'll have sulfur binding with some other things in the soil, some of those salts, that saline that I've got out there, and I'll flush that stuff out. So over time, this is going to fix itself, and then I'm not too worried about all this other stuff. Sure, if you want, you can go throw some straw out there and incorporate that into your soil in the short term. Getting more organic material in that soil can absolutely help, but you know what? We got to get the drainage fixed, and we absolutely do want to get something growing on there as soon as we can.
All right, one other drainage question. We get this a lot. In these problem spots in my field, should my tile lines be closer to the soil surface, and how much narrower should they be?
Well, this is a judgment call. So we see a lot of the saline soils are in the western Corn Belt where we don't get a lot of rainfall. So in that case, when you don't have a lot of rainfall, you might as well have those tile lines pretty shallow, 3 feet deep, something like that. And if you've got a real bad saline spot, for example, then I'm going to put a whole bunch of tile in. I might put it at 15, 20 feet apart. Because a lot of times where we find the high saline areas, they are also very heavy soil. When you have very heavy soil, not a lot of rainfall, you want the tile relatively shallow and relatively close together.
Saline soils can certainly be a big problem because oftentimes in those areas we get little to no yield. And if we can fix those problems and get up to a normal yield level, it can be a huge boost for the whole farm. So follow the strategies that we've talked about today to fix saline soils on your farm.
One of the other things that will help your yield overall on your farm is controlling our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
We raise corn, beans, and then about 7,500 head of hogs a year. About 800 acres of beans this year. All 800 are Liberty Link this year. Our biggest weed pressure is definitely the water hemp. That's why we switched to Liberty Link. We were Roundup ready, and we had some resistance. I got sprayed 3 times one year that didn't even come close to killing them. So the next year we switched to Liberty Link thinking we'd switch back and forth every year, and Liberty Link performed so well we never switched back. We have a test plot that had Roundup and Liberty Link right next to each other, and the Liberty Link out-yielded it the past 5 years. It's very important to have good weed control. For one, it just looks better to look at a nice clean field, but yield-wise it's also very important.
The Liberty Link system has a 2+ bushel per acre yield advantage over Asgrow Roundup Ready to Extend soybeans. More at libertylinkadvantage.bayer.us. Always read and follow label instructions.
Nodulation. It's essential for nitrogen fixation in soybeans, but how can you help it happen in your fields? Monsanto BioAg offers inoculants that answer that question. Microbial seed applied solutions that work to establish high populations of rhizobia in your fields, helping with optimum nodulation and increased performance in your soybeans. Learn how inoculants powered by nature can help you at monsantobioag.com/inoculate.
Commodity Classic is an early adopter's paradise. This is where what's next happens, where you can meet the people who are changing the way you farm. From the jaw-dropping trade show to outstanding educational sessions to one-on-one conversations with other farmers from across the nation, you'll be among the first to experience the new ideas, innovations, and technology that can help your operation grow beyond. Spend some farmer time in Anaheim, Tuesday, February 27th through Thursday, March 1st. Discover more at commodityclassic.com.
let's take a look at our picks for the championship season. We've got 1034-0.
No. I don't want to talk about them. I want to talk about this Agro Liquid team. Take a look at this lineup. They got it all. The talent, their players can meet any challenge on any field. The coaching staff, the best I've seen.
So that's your pick? No discussions?
Nope. Agro Liquid is the team. They're going all the way to the championship.
What do you do if you have a lodging issue in your soybeans or another crop? Well, here's our first piece of advice. Don't call the seed dealer. Yes, I know there's some differences from one variety to the next, believe me, but there are many other steps you can take regardless of whatever variety you plant.
The other thing we want to blame is something we can't control. Wind. Well, it must have been just terrible winds. But you know what? Many times I see this lodged field that's getting blamed on the wind, and right across the fence, there's a field that's not lodged. So if the wind was the cause, shouldn't it have been the same across all hybrids? So there's certainly some differences in the management from one field to the next. That's what we want to focus on, what you can control today.
All right, here's the first thing that I'm always going to bring up whenever I see a lodging issue is I want to look at your soil test and see what your base saturation K levels are. If you're not at least 4% K, you're probably going to have some issues sooner or later. And if you're going for big time yields, you might even want to be in that 6 to 8% range for base saturation K. I can just tell you from personal experience, where we've really bumped the K levels, we've gotten a lot thicker stalk. And I don't care if it's soybeans or wheat or corn, whatever crop it is, we want good levels of K in that plant.
Well, it's not just K, it's also copper and manganese. And when we think about those nutrients, you say, wait a minute, I don't focus my fertility program on them. You should be focusing on those nutrients too, because they play a role in many functions within the plant, including making a good solid stalk and producing the lignin to hold that stalk stiff and upright.
Okay, one of the other things too, we just talked about, hey, we want to have good high levels of potassium, copper, and manganese. Great, but you know what? We want lower levels of nitrogen. Yes, lower levels of nitrogen. If you overdo it, and I'm not saying don't have the right level of nitrogen, I'm just saying don't overdo it as much as you can help it on the nitrogen deal. You know, the good thing here is we're talking a lot more today about spoon feeding nitrogen anyway, especially with lighter soils and higher yield levels. But the more you can split apply that nitrogen, put it on when the plant actually needs it, as opposed to super early in the season when the plant doesn't need so much nitrogen, you're going to find less overall height to the plant, but hopefully more yield and less lodging. So when I look at 2017, for example, we saw some really tall soybeans, exceptionally tall. A lot of that went all the way back to 2016 because we had the latest fall we've ever had. A lot of people in the upper Midwest even, it was Thanksgiving before they had a killing frost. Thanksgiving, it's unbelievable. So what happened is all through those fall months, there's a lot more mineralization of the soil, and we found soil nitrate levels very, very high. So what that meant going into 2017 is there was excess nitrogen in almost every field. That led to a lot more top growth, that led to a lot more white mold problem, a lot more lodging problem in 2017. So it really stemmed back to, hey, there was a lot more nitrogen sitting out there than we thought, and then a lot of people applied normal rates of nitrogen, which made it even worse.
Well, the other side of this too, Brian, is that the economics aren't great in farming right now. So when you're going to cut back and you look at a soil test and you say, well, I've got enough parts per million of K out there, I'm just going to cut back there. But guys aren't cutting back on the nitrogen. They're at least putting out what that crop needs. And now what we've created is that imbalance that we often talk about, that a balance of fertility is so important for our plants. We just got things a little out of whack. Now, the other couple of factors that I want to focus on are insects and diseases, and certainly we saw in 2017 both of those prevalent in many crops. Let me talk first about the disease. When you look at cornfields across the country, we saw more anthracnose, more fusarium, gibberella, a number of different stalk rot type issues. Part of it stemmed back to a cool spring. So for a lot of farmers, they're putting corn in the ground in cool, wet conditions, leaving us more prone to getting infection early in the season that's going to result in poor quality stalks later on in the season. In soybeans, we saw some of the same things, but in many cases it was due to late season cool and wet conditions. And I talked to guys all across the soybean growing areas of our country that say, you know, we were a little cooler than normal in August and it really made a difference. We saw more diseases pop up late. Even the guys that had sprayed a fungicide at R3 were seeing disease come in at R5 or R6 and compromising the stem quality.
Here's the last thing I wanted to talk about: excessive population. Now, I'm not saying, oh, everybody's planting way too many plants, but what I am saying is, let's say you got a field or two, or just areas in certain fields where you find lodging is a real challenge. Maybe cutting back that population will help a little bit. It should make the stalk just a little bit bigger. So it's something I want you to consider going into this next year. Maybe it's variable population planting, something like that, but when you hit those areas, maybe cut that population back a little bit, and that absolutely should help reduce your lodging issues.
Lodging can be a huge challenge out on farms in many different crops, especially if it happens early in the season or below where your seed is at. So if it's below the ear on corn or low in the plant on soybeans, where you can't harvest that seed, you're going to have a huge loss. You can solve it many times with fertility issues focusing on potassium, copper, and manganese, but also be on the lookout for plant diseases and insects that could get in the way too.
Excessive weeds can also lead to lodging problems. We'll talk about our Weed of the Week coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Dow AgroSciences. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
Our Weed of the Week is musk thistle.
There are many biennial thistles that will fight, and more times than not they're in pasture and rangeland, maybe even roadside ditches, not out in disturbed fields. We don't have a big challenge with them there.
Okay, so whenever we think about a biennial or 2-year life cycle plant, ideally we'd love to see you control it in year 1, not in year 2 when it may be going to seed.
Oh, Brian, but we don't notice it in year 1 because it's this rosette that's low to the ground. If we've got good grass growth around it, well, it can hide out in the field and be tough to see.
Okay, so if, let's say, you want to just spray every other year, which some farmers like to do, we would strongly encourage you use a good residual herbicide. Now, the best one for musk thistle is going to be Milestone. That's excellent, but just keep in mind that Milestone and its use is not going to allow you to rotate to certain crops. So if you say, this might be my last year or 2 with pasture, I want to put it into cropland, well, be really careful with that rotation. My choice number 2 is Tordon. That was the old standard until Milestone came out, but both of those products have excellent residual. Both of those products are going to be outstanding on musk thistle.
All right, so here's the other thing though, Brian. We hear guys saying, well, what about 2,4-D? What about dicamba? Sure. There's new formulations of each. Is this a situation where that could be beneficial?
Well, you can use those products if you want to. It's just they're not going to have long-term residual. They're not going to be quite as good on musk thistle. If you're going to use one of those products, I'd suggest using a very high rate. Make absolutely sure you've burned that musk thistle to the ground at least, and then hopefully it's not going to be going to seed.
And here's the other thing that I call wishful thinking. Well, the seed head is out, it's flowering. If I spray now, can I kill the germination on that seed?
Well, it depends on how far along that seed is, but let's just put it this way. We really want you spraying a little earlier before you ever see seed. That way you don't have to worry about it.
That's all time for our weed, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
Smart farming is playing hockey with my son.
All right, sweetie, you excited to go? Yeah. Smart farming is going on more family vacations.
Smart farming is getting some much needed rest.
Smart farming is spending more time doing what you love. Make it happen with Farm Command.
N, P, and K. They're critical for a healthy crop. Improve their availability and your yield potential with QuickRoots microbial seed inoculant. QuickRoots technology contains 2 powerful microbes that can help improve access to key nutrients, and it's available in an easy-to-apply formulation. Simply mix it directly into your dry planter box and your seeds will be covered. Learn more at monsantobioag.com/quickroots.
Our Morton is so much more to us than just a building. It's a place where we spend time with friends. It's a place where we hold family gatherings. It's become very important to us.
Morton Buildings. For work. For life. For generations. Contact us now during our annual sales event to save on your next building.
Let's face it, Joe. Some of these guys aren't easy to play. Biologicals are expensive. Humates and plant growth regulators are messy.
Yeah, but AgroLiquid has 4 new players that have really eliminated those problems. The Primer Go line has helped their team realize the benefits.
Wait, so season-long nutrition and optimized yields while creating a biologically active soil?
That's right. Primer Go line is a fantastic addition to AgroLiquid's stellar team.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
There are 6,272,640 square inches in an acre. We counted. Why? Because we designed the TigerMate 255 field cultivator and 2000 series early riser planter to maximize every single one. So when you create the most level seed bed in the industry and target a nickel-size area to plant a seed and never miss, you'll know in high-efficiency farming, there's one name to count on. Case IH. Rethink productivity. Learn more at caseih.com/everyinch.
Looking to boost your soybean yields this year? Improving your fertilizer program is often the #1 key to bigger soybean yields. But where should you place the plant food? I'll share some ideas during today's Iron Talk. With corn, one of the quickest and easiest ways to boost a fertility program is by putting some fertilizer in furrow at planting time. With soybeans, you just can't safely do a whole lot of that. Sure, you can put a gallon or 2 in furrow depending on soil types and other factors. However, to fertilize soybeans, you need to plan ahead exactly where you're going to place those nutrients. Here are 3 times that you should have equipment set up to handle soybean fertility. First is planting time. Yes, I just said you can't put much in furrow, but don't forget about using 2x2 placement. This is going to be very important for corn as well over the next few years. You can safely put a lot more fertilizer just off to the side if you're set up to do it in a 2x2. In fact, the world record soybean grower utilizes a 2x2 on both sides of the row and sees a great benefit. Secondly, you can apply fertilizer in a foliar application. If you have a sprayer, you can put certain liquid fertilizers right in with your fungicide, insecticide, or herbicide application. Check with your agronomist in advance, though, to see what growth stage would be the best time to do the foliar and which other treatments you can and cannot mix with it. Also, since you won't be applying huge amounts of fertilizer this way, think of foliar feeding as a way to stimulate the roots to pull up more of your soil fertility. The third time we think about soybean fertility is deep banding. We've really seen good results of deep banding fertilizer in the fall ahead of soybeans, especially on medium to heavy textured soils. You could potentially do this in the spring as well, but soil conditions often favor fall applications. You can boost your soybean yields this year, but getting set up to apply the plant food required to reach high yield goals needs to happen right now. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
Well, we hope you've enjoyed our show today. That is all the time we've got. But before we go, we want to invite you to tune in to the Ag PhD radio show, where we take your live phone calls each weekday at 2 p.m. Central. You can find us on SiriusXM Channel 147.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Soil is nature's filter to keep contaminants out of our water. To learn how farmers manage soil and groundwater, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.